In this story, I'm looking at the sensual seductiveness of slow and what we can learn from the medieval fighting snail. Whatever our understanding of snails, and it's usually something like slow, boring, perhaps slimy, medieval artists had a different perspective, in more ways than one. Pick up any medieval manuscript and you're likely to find that well-known ferocity, the fighting snail. Yup, fighting snails. The mind boggles. These artworks were known as marginalia, and they were added after the text of a manuscript had been finished to bling it up a bit. They were intricate borders depicting things like curly foliage, fantastical creatures and other tantalising imagery. They were lovingly crafted, sometimes at the time, sometimes added decades later, but their artists used precious pigments such as lapis lazuli and gold, and they were found across the range of medieval religious works. Azaria Gorvet at the BBC said, "They could be bizarre, playful, grotesque and even rude, with bare bottoms, penises, medical conditions, and there were a surprisingly large number of bloodthirsty rabbits gracing the pages of otherwise sober devotional texts." Often marginalia seem to have had little connection to the text they were found next to. Fighting snails as a subject proliferated between 1390 and 1410 and were found in manuscripts across Europe. Some of them ultimately made their way into carvings in cathedral facades. Although there was wide variation in how these went down, the most usual visualization was of a snail assailing a knight, their antennae pointed menacingly forward like swords or arrows. You'd think by the time a snail had moved a fraction, surely their knight opponent would have just stood on them and removed the danger. Oh, okay, so they were giant fighting snails. Well, that makes all the difference, even if the defining thing about snails is their lack of speed. But you'd have to say they might be slippery opponents. Theories abound about their point. Was there deep significant meaning, or was it just a bit of satirical fun meant to entertain and amuse, or to keep bored monks from going bonkers? Is the snail knight fight a suggestion of a world turned upside down by the lower orders rising up? Or is it a suggestion that the manly, brave, all-victorious knight isn't quite as machismo as we were led to believe? Or perhaps they were just the medieval equivalent of memes. So what do medieval fighting snails tell us about our contemporary need to slow down? Well, absolutely nothing on a literal level. Metaphorically, they say heaps. When you look closely at those cowering knights immobilised by panic in front of a slow-creeping mollusk, you see the perfect caricature of the modern professional. We like to think of ourselves as high-speed, all-conquering masters of efficiency, yet we're held hostage and exhausted by the relentless slow-burn creep of our notification feeds. Choosing to step out of the fast lane is our own modern version of turning the world upside down, a small, absurd act of rebellion against the tyranny of the immediate. For example, last weekend I felt an overwhelming impulse to write a letter. Yes, that honest-to-God, old-fashioned form of communication known as snail mail. In the end I didn't. I sent an email instead, but the ghost of letters past had already been unlocked. It did make me think that snails have something to teach us about life in the snow lane. Is it time to channel our inner snails and slow down, make a collective, considered decision to step away from the scrolling and surrender to purposeful sloth? Surely there must be more to life than an endless digital scroll metering our limited attention out in nanoseconds. That sudden impulse took me back to the heart-lifting discovery of a handwritten letter nestling in the letterbox. Receiving mail used to demand a ritual. You had to find the perfect sanctuary to match the mood. Could have been a secluded deck chair under a shady summer tree, a squishy armchair pulled up in front of a roaring winter fire, or even a sweet-scented candlelit bath. There was a delicious, almost hedonistic pleasure in holding back, prolonging the anticipation before finally ripping into the envelope. Of course, good letters took time to craft because they were the unburdening of the soul, a shared repository of our deepest hopes, fears, joys and sorrows. There's an almost sacred flow of a pen over paper that keyboard bashing simply can't replicate. Lacking a delete button, writing required a rare precision and coherence of thought. The growing pile of screwed up paper on the floor spoke volumes about our uncertainties and captured the raw honesty of the human mind in a way our flawless digital draft never can. I still remember the sensuousness of the first ink stroke on a sheet of heavy, high-quality paper. The almost mathematical challenge of writing in microscopic script, desperate to pack a lifetime into those impossibly small, prepaid blue airmail envelopes. You folded them up, licked the sticky tabs, and risked a sharp paper cut on your tongue just to send your thoughts across the globe. Today's risk-averse world might frown on that hazard. Whatever, an email simply cannot compete with the tactile weight of a neatly tied bundle of vintage letters or a box of treasured greetings cards. I still keep mine. Even when printed, an email just doesn't carry the same emotional currency. But I'm really a bit worn out by life in the fast lane. This always-on world of ours is exhausting, and the reality of our digital isolation is awakening a sleeping dragon in many of us, a quiet nostalgia for the deliberate pace of bygone pleasures. We find ourselves longing for the simple allure of wandering through library aisles, becoming utterly lost in a good book, or sitting down over a long, carefully crafted meal rather than resorting to the frantic convenience of dashboard dining or Uber Eats. Most of all, we're starved of the ultimate luxury, reflective time. Reflective time is so essential to our mental health and well-being. But it was this absence of stillness that likely summoned a ghost from my primary school days. This morning I woke up with the rhythmic, poignant lines of Leisure by Welsh poet William Henry Davies rattling around in my head. Written in 1911, the poem captures a past zeitgeist that feels as distant today as the furthest stars in a dark winter sky. For today's often helicoptered children spot-welded to their digital screens in light-polluted cities, the natural world has become an abstract concept. But Davies understood that a life stripped of quiet observations is no life at all. So humour me, I'm not much good at reciting poetry, but I'll give it a go, and stand still with his words for a moment. What is this life if full of care we have no time to stand and stare? No time to stand beneath the boughs and stare as long as sheep or cows. No time to see when woods we pass where squirrels hide their nuts in grass. No time to see in broad daylight streams full of stars like skies at night. No time to turn at beauty's glance and watch her feet, how they can dance. No time to wait till her mouth can enrich the smile her eyes began. A poor life this, if full of care we have no time to stand and stare. Beautiful, isn't it? And this poem's in the public domain, so it's okay to recite it in full. In any case, to be completely honest, I lust after slow right up until the moment I remember life before the convenience of Google and AI. In all seriousness, I wouldn't trade the present for the pre-digital era. There's simply too much about our connected world that is genuinely better. Yet my hope is that we don't entirely lose the specialness of the slow lane as we navigate this dizzying era of technological change. Perhaps the sheer velocity of the modern world will inspire a quiet renaissance of our own making, a collective choice to step away from the algorithmic traps, the endless hunt for the digital validation and the dopamine loop of likes and follows. I have to say, as a writer, I'm just as guilty of chasing the digital current as anyone, but I've always made a conscious effort to carve out time to smell the roses, to stand and stare, if you will, and appreciate how infinitely precious these fleeting moments are. I see no earthly reason we need to cower like those medieval knights, paralysed by the terrifying vastness of the quiet mind. By channeling our inner snail, surrendering to a bit of purposeful sloth, and reclaiming our attention, we might just win our own quiet battle against the fast lane.